I'm delighted to be back in London talking to John Illsley. John, we spoke back in May when you were kind of in the middle of doing a bunch of stuff and looking forward to other things. But I mean, first things first, to remind everyone what we spoke about there. We talked about coming up for air. I'll just give you that. That's the solo album that you brought out. We talked about the tracks.
Somebody signed it as well.
And since then, yeah, I met Jodie and Robbie as well, and had a good chat about it. But I think first things first, let's go into some of the interesting things that happened since May. You had a small birthday. First of all, let's kick off with that.
I had a small birthday in June. Yeah. Coming of age birthday, I call it. Yeah. It's funny when you hit 70. I must say, it's a slightly different thing than 60, or even 50 or 40. You're on the home run really at 70.
And there was a special gig at the Paradiso in Amsterdam. So tell us about the venue, the choice of venue, and how that went.
Well, I wanted to go back to where the Straits played their first shows in Holland, and 78 was the we played at the Paradiso as a four-piece, obviously, in 1978. But the most interesting thing about it for me was the fact that the security was run by Hell's Angels, and as a consequence, when we were playing the gig, we had Hell's Angels actually sitting on the stage, like watching us like this. I mean, like as far away as you are. It was very peculiar. And they're, these are big people, and so you don't argue with any of them. You know what I mean? And so they were the security. And after the gig, of course, they all came back to the dressing room and drank all our beer. So we didn't have anything to drink. So that was the security. So, and anyway, I wanted to relive this moment, and it's 40 years since we played at the Paradiso. And so we got hold of an agent, and he said, great idea, let's have a birthday gig. And it was a wonderful experience. It was a wonderful show, thankfully. It all went very well. Great audience, very young audience, which kind of surprised me. I was expecting some of the old guard to turn out, but they did. But there was a lot of young people there too. I think they just wanted to see, a bit of the history of the Straits redone again. And anyway, it was a great gig, and then we went off to Germany for 2 weeks and basically just got exhausted.
So did any of those original Dutch bikers turn up in suits? So I was one of them. I always liked you, but I didn't tell the other gang members.
No, nobody did that. But they'd be of a certain age now, so I mean, yeah. Whether they'd be wearing suits or not, I don't know.
And the kind of the format of your live shows has evolved since I think the first time I saw you at Nell's in London, where it was a two-set band show. Yeah. You've now evolved that into kind of a Life and Times, almost Q&A mixed with music. So tell us about that format.
Well, actually, I'm still doing both, to be honest. I mean, I'm doing the full band situation, but I'm also doing this Q&A Life and Times of Dire Straits because. It happened slightly by accident. I was asked to do a Q&A at a club in London, which is owned by a friend of mine, and I originally said no, I don't want to really go over those old days. And he said, no, it can be fun. We'll just have a laugh. We'll just chat. And I said, well, I'll bring a couple of musicians with me, and we'll play a bit of music as well. So anyway, it turned out to be very entertaining, more entertaining than I thought it was going to be. But in the audience was one of my old managers, and he started sort of. Sort of basically telling me where I was going wrong. These are the tour dates and stuff. I'll put that on the floor for the time being. But he was saying, "No, John, it wasn't like that. It was like this." And I said, "I mean, well, we better do this later." So we talked about it, and suddenly we're doing this Life and Times of Dire Straits Q&A thing around the country, and actually, it was really good fun, apart from anything else. And the audience seemed to really like the tales of the old days, how the band came together. Because they're sort of strange moments. You don't really know until you start thinking back. You sort of take everything for granted. Everybody said, oh, you just had this meteoric sort of rise. But actually there was a lot of stuff that went down in those early days. Playing the Marquee Club and playing in Wolverhampton to 4 people, and there was a fight that broke out. I mean, things like that, How did this come together, and which pub did you see the Sultans of Swing in? And, Wild West End was about me and Mark walking through Soho in the old days, going to the Barocco bar and having a pasta and looking at all the guitar shops and thinking, well, you're never going to be able to buy these things, and how times change, and suddenly you end up playing on big stages and Live Aid and blah blah. You know, the rest is history, as they say. But I think most people, when they come into this Q&A, are interested in those early days, how things sort of just come together, sort of like some sort of synchronicity. I don't know. It's difficult to explain, but fun talking about it.
And it's your friend and colleague and long-time acquaintance Paul Cummings that does the Q&A. So that must be great having someone that's kind of lived through it as well.
He's lived through all of it, and thankfully he's got a better memory than I've got, because my memory does slip. But what's interesting about it, every night is different, because he'll say blah blah blah. Look at this photograph, and who's that? And I go, I have no idea. And I think, oh, I know who that is. And then I say, I've just remembered this thing. And he said, oh my God, here we go. So my memory suddenly gets alight, and I start talking about a situation somewhere, you know, with the band or with people or individuals. And, you know, suddenly remember when Bob Dylan got on stage with us in Melbourne in Australia playing, and, you know, he goes, oh my God, you mean Bob got on stage with you? I said, yeah, you know, it was amazing. I mean, he was in the hotel and Mark invited him to come on. We played some songs with him, and Dylan changed all the keys, so we had to do them in different, you know, just walked on and played the things in a different key. That's typical Bob, of course. So moments like that, you know, magical moments, you know.
And then I think he lured Mark away to play on one of his albums.
Oh, he did a couple. He certainly produced one, I think, that's for certain. Yeah, definitely.
So you mentioned Live Aid. I mean, in 1985, you had, I believe, the unenviable task of being in between, was it U2 and Queen?
Oh, it was very odd, because I was actually talking to somebody earlier today about it, and I don't know whether many people realise, but it was difficult to get together. You know, Bob really had to work very hard to convince people to come on, because everybody's very wary about doing these sort of things, because they want to find out who else is doing it. It's like, well, if so-and-so does it, we'll do it, sort of thing. And because the band, you know, was pretty big at that time in the mid-80s, and, you know, Brothers in Arms was a big album, the tour was big, and the band was, you know, and Bob said, you've just got to headline it. And they said, we can't. And he said, you've got to headline it. We said, we can't. We're playing 11 or 12 sold-out shows at the arena next door. All the tickets are sold. Well, he said, cancel one. He said, no, but we're not going to cancel one. He said, you've got to headline it. You're the biggest band in the world, right? Above all this sort of stuff, right? So in the end, we said, look, the only way we can do it is by playing in the afternoon, and that's the reason why we're playing there, because we walked across from the sound check at the arena, across the car park, literally, the band just walked across the car park to the backstage area. Somebody brought our guitars over. We went and plugged in, played two songs, I think. I can't remember whether it was 2 songs.
It's 2, yes.
And then had a bit of a chat with a few people backstage, went back and did the gig at the arena while the whole of the gig was going on. So, I mean, you know, who would know what was going to happen? And that's why we played where we played.
I guess maybe it was a good or a bad thing. You missed Queen's set, because that might have been quite distracting if you saw that and then had to go back and do your own gig. Maybe we're not going to be the biggest band for that much longer. No,
well, of course they as we know now, they sort of reformed just to do that. And look, Freddie Mercury. Let's face it, there are a few amazing frontmen, and he'll go down in history as being one of the most extraordinary frontmen that has ever existed. You can't fight that. It's like having Jagger, you know, on the stage. I mean, just forget it. Or Bowie, you know. Their presence is so huge. I think Mark did a pretty good job, to be honest, you know, holding all that together. He didn't really enjoy being in the spotlight all the time, Mark. He didn't love it, you know, but he realised, you know, with the success of the band, he had to, you know, you had to put up with things.
That's right, and I think I saw you in 1990 at the Silver Clef at Knebworth, which was a kind of like a mini reprise of Live Aid.
It was actually, yeah. It was very windy that day. I remember the wind blowing like crazy, and everybody's hair was going all over the place, and, you know, clothes were flapping around, and yeah. And I think Eric played on that with us, and I think Elton was on it.
Yeah, Sting turned up as well.
Sting turned up, and Phil Collins, I think, was on drums again.
Yeah,
it was like another mini kind of Live Aid. Actually, it was a mini Prince's Trust type thing. Do you remember? I don't know whether you saw that when Jagger and Bowie turned up unannounced on that, and the McCartney was playing and Rod Stewart was playing, Tina Turner. It was an incredible day. That was. I mean, I wish somebody had actually filmed that properly, because that was an extraordinary group of people that got together.
Talking of festivals and extreme weather, you played Glastonbury last summer. I suppose it was July.
It was July, and no, it was June actually. I think it was June.
I'm never sure.
30th of June, I think. It was the week after my birthday. It was steaming hot, as you know, and of course everybody goes to Glastonbury. It rains. The earth was as hard as iron. The sun was beating down. Everybody was completely burnt to a cinder, and we took the Life and Times of Dire Straits thing there, and amazingly we pulled it off.
Were you indoors for
we
that?
were in the acoustic tent.
So you probably got a better turnout for that.
We hoisted this massive screen behind us, which was a real experiment. And the crew at Glastonbury, I've got to tell you, are amazing. They're quite amazing, and they pulled it off, and it went down very well actually. We did a short one, obviously an hour, whereas normally we do about 2 hours, but because there's a lot of history to talk about. But no, it went okay.
And I mean, right now in the music business, it's all about anniversaries. It's 25 years since you left the band, and you've been releasing 6 sort of studio albums, a couple of live albums, and now you're touring regularly with an established lineup. You've got, as far as I can count, about, is it 9 dates you've got coming up? Starting very soon.
It's a very short little trip. We're doing actually 3 charity ones. The first one is for a wheelchair charity in Winchester this Saturday, and then there's 2 I'm doing at my old school for the bursaries, so they can take on kids who can't afford to go there. And Nick Evans, the author who did The Horse Whisperer, he and I were at school together.
Oh, really?
And so we're going to chat about the school days before we start doing the Q&A, so that could be quite funny.
Is that Bromsgrove?
Bromsgrove School.
Oh, I didn't know you went there.
It's the first place. I'm going back to the hall, Routh Hall in Bromsgrove School, where I walked on stage for the first time with another guitar player. We sat down and we played Hang Down Your Head, Tom Dooley. And I can't remember where it went, but that was the first thing I ever played on stage, and I'm going back to play on that stage again. It's going to be quite a moment.
Because originally you were a guitar player. Tell us about the kind of the transition to picking the bass. Fewer strings?
I always wanted to be a guitar player. And I mean, I strum the guitar now very simply, and I do all the acoustic stuff on the albums and things, and some of the electric stuff. But I've wanted to join the school band, and the only way I could join it was by being the bass player. So I said, okay, I'll be the bass player. I don't care. I just want to join the band. Get me in. So I played an acoustic guitar with the top strings taken off for a bit, and then my brother, William, who was a fantastic guy in the woodwork shop, he built me a guitar. He built me a bass guitar. It looked a bit like a spade, so we used to call it the Spade. And then I borrowed, funny enough, another member of one of the groups at the school had a Beatles bass, the Hofner violin bass. So I used to nick that and borrow that and play that. So those are the early days. You've got to cut your teeth somewhere.
And in these acoustic shows, for people that haven't seen it before, you're the main singer.
I am. Well, I'm the singer in the band, in my band. Yeah, of course. Yeah. And
I think because people forget that for all those shows you did over all those years with Dire Straits, it was pretty much you doubling or doing harmonies with Mark throughout. Yeah. And I think Pick sang as well on the early stuff as well.
No, David sang a bit.
David.
Pick never sang actually. In the very early days, it was just David and I, and of course when the band got bigger, Guy Fletcher was singing, and we never put a microphone near Alan Clark. He was a wonderful piano player, but a terrible singer. So that was that. Yeah.
So if we look at the extent of the tour, you see, as you say, it's a relatively short tour.
Yeah, it's very short.
Midlands and southwest and southeast. I know people that live elsewhere would be saying, when are you going to come up north or Ireland? What are your thoughts on that?
I'd love to play in Ireland, and also I was talking to some people earlier about playing up in Yorkshire Newcastle and stuff, and it's just really a question of time. I don't like to be away too much these days, so I'm going to do another little Q&A in March next year. And Paul, my manager, and I have decided that, we're going to do a couple of weeks twice a year, just take it to different places. And playing in small theatres where people can sit down, get a drink, and a much more intimate sort of environment. And it works really well. It's a lot of fun. I mean, in London we're doing Nell's. I think we're doing Nell's
Yes.
on the 20th, yeah. Nell's Jazz and Blues. Yeah.
Ah, so it's a really great band. I think owned by Vince Power, that everyone knows from Mean Fiddler.
Yes, exactly, yes. Well, it's Northern Irish, isn't it? The owners, I think, are.
Yeah.
And the reason I wanted to play there, I played there a couple of times with the band, as a normal band, but I saw Van Morrison there about 3 or 4 years ago. He did a weekend, and it was fabulous. And I thought, I've got to come and play here. I like this. If he's going to play here, I'll play here. So,
But I guess for you, there's always the draw of the New Forest, where you made your home all those years ago.
Yeah.
And if I got this right, it's about 30 years since you moved there, and it's about the same anniversary as when you bought the East End Arms, the pub.
Yes, well, in fact, actually, just before we went away to the Paradiso, we celebrated 30 years of ownership, and I took the band down there and gave everybody free drinks for a few hours, and my God, it was a big bar bill. And some food, and all the locals came, and we played for a couple of hours with the band. Very hot, very sweaty, fantastic night. Actually, it was a great night. So there's 30 years since we've had the pub, yeah.
And for people that maybe have kind of lost track with what you've been up to, you did have some health challenges, which gladly I see you're looking fit and well.
Yeah.
But how are things going?
Well, so far so good. I mean, you never know what's around the corner. But I had the right people looking after me. I was in the London clinic for a month in isolation. It's a very weird experience, but they basically change your immune system. That's what they do to combat the leukemia. So and I was one of the fortunate few that got away with it.
No, it's great. We're glad you're here and everything's
not as glad
fine.
as me.
Quite right. Let me think. I think you had some dates scheduled for Spain, but they didn't happen in the end.
Oh God, it was such a nightmare. I feel so bad about that, but the promoter, like 2 weeks or 3 weeks before, just suddenly said, I haven't got any money. And I said, well, how are we going to do this tour? I mean, how are we going to do it? And he said, I don't know. And then somebody else stepped in and made the most derisory offer. And I said, I'm not going to Spain and lose £40,000. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
And I've got to pay all the band, I've got to pay the crew, I've got to do all this sort of stuff. And so I just said, look, we're going to reschedule to next year. We'll try and reschedule these dates to next year. So that's what we're trying to do. But it was the first time I've cancelled anything. It felt really bad. Thankfully things hadn't gone too far down the track, but it was just messy, and I just wanted to I said I can't.
Quite right.
I can't do this. I've been doing this for too long. I can't deal with this business of things not working properly.
Yeah, I think people will accept that. So I mean, coming back to present, as we've said, there are 9 dates that run from the 9th of November through to the 23rd. Some interesting places like Lyme Regis.
Yeah, there's a lovely theatre
Loudon,
there.
wherever that is.
Loudon is a really strange place. I played there a couple of times, and as soon as it goes on sale, it sells out like that.
Yeah.
Within an hour.
Yeah.
It's really weird. It's a place near Nottingham. It's very small. I think it's run by volunteers. It's fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant. Wavendon, the Stables, famous place that we're playing there again, which will be great. And Peterborough, Shrewsbury, Nell's, Cardiff we're playing, and Lyme Regis is a lovely marine theatre down there on the quay.
Oh, super.
Yeah, lovely. And it's short and sweet. Short and sweet, yeah.
So, just in closing, the album is a great album. It's a 7-track album, just a shade, I think about 30 minutes or so.
Yeah, it's short. It's short.
When we spoke last time, you said you wanted to get an album out that was cohesive, where all the songs were fully developed, but you had others which you felt were good songs but weren't quite ready to put on.
No, they weren't ready. And, those will go on the next one. Simple as that, really. There's no point in putting stuff on if you're not happy with it, because people say, well, that's, why... that doesn't sound like that's finished. So I've just put on things that I think work very well together, and I think it's a nice, concise, tight bit of work. So, it is what it is.
So when might we see part 2?
Part 2, well, everything's going around in my mind at the moment. I've got lots of ideas, little bit of piano pieces and stuff, and lyrics. I've just got to find the time to put it all together, and it'll just somehow or other it all just suddenly starts to fit. You think things aren't going to, and then suddenly you go, oh, that works with that, and this, and that's good, and I don't know. There's a little bit of mystery about it still, which is great.
But for now, we have coming up for air the current album that came out around about 6 months ago or so.
Yeah.
So people can enjoy that. They can visit your website, see what you're up to, and certainly for the dates that haven't sold out, including Nels on the 20th of November, as you said, we'll look forward to seeing you there.
It's getting close now, so we can squeeze a few more in.
Brilliant. It's great to talk to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you very
All
much.
right,
Thanks a
goodbye.
lot. Cheers.